As a UN employee, I was able to get in with enormous difficulty, and I could see that the people of Gaza were strangulated. No new ideas were. People talk about food and they talk about medicines. Actually, there are no new ideas. How can there be? Because people fester with each other. They talk to each other. You get that in households. If people don't go out a lot, they end up, they know what everybody else has said. The whole conversation has been said over and over again. There's no fresh air blowing through Gaza. So of course it was a hotbed for all kinds of reactions of this kind, of the sort we've just seen. So as a result of all this, you can see the stage was set for some problem or other. Now, if you add to that the Fatah, the previous Fatah-dominated Palestinian government, included among its members a very large number of people who were corrupted by the occupation. Now, I want everybody to be clear. They were corrupted, not in the normal sense of that term, not because they went around embezzling funds and so on, although some of that did happen. The main problem was that the occupation had corrupted them in the way that occupations do. Colonial occupations always cultivate a class, usually a ruling class, between them, that is the colonial power, and the ordinary people. And that class is given special privileges, etc. You know this story from history. I mean, I don't have to go through it. That's exactly what had happened with the Palestinians. So a whole class of largely Fatah officials had come into being who were enjoying certain advantages from the Israelis. Now, in the Palestinian sense, these advantages are really pathetic. We're talking about permits to be able to go in and out of Palestinian towns and cities, permits for a family that perhaps a child needs to have medical treatment, somebody to be able to get out and go to hospital. From that end of the scale, obviously, to much higher things, plus this kind of VIP status. And I can't tell you how depressing it was. I know there are people sitting here who live there and they know exactly what I mean. I can't tell you how depressing it was to go through these atrocious checkpoints and have some official from the Palestine government withdrew because he was a minister and had been given some kind of privilege to do this. It's extremely depressing scenario. Now, that of course was noticed by all the Palestinians. I mean, I could see it a mile off, let alone the people living there who are living with it. And they were fed up to the back teeth, frankly, with this layer, this particular group of people. And so, in a way, you can see that the rage that erupted in Gaza, which was, of course, was excessive and cannot be defended, yet it can be understood, because actually that's what it was a rage against. All this, collection of circumstances and conditions. Of course, you know what the real reason was for the economic boycott, I hope. I'm sure and hope everybody knows what the real reason was. The ostensible reason was, these are terrorists, we can't deal with terrorists. Hamas is a terrorist group, we can't deal with it. But the real reason, of course, was that it had been quite comfortable for the Israeli occupation to have a Fatah administration, because a lot of people in Fatah were seen as much more pliable, much more compliant with Israeli demands and the international demands, and therefore they could see that these people could be brought to sign to agreements which the mass of Palestinians would reject. So in other words, when you then had a Hamas government which comes in on a very different platform and says, I don't see why I should recognize Israel's right to exist. It doesn't recognize mine. Says things which are really go back to the fundamentals of this conflict. This is bad news. Nobody wants to know this. So immediately they started to work covertly and overtly, lots of dirty tricks, in order to bring down the Hamas government and bring back this group of incompetents, and many of whom are also corrupt, back to power. And as you can see what's happened, the split, and now you've got, right on cue, the international community comes along and says, that's terrific, we like you, this is the same old people, the same old faces, we like you and we can do business with you and we're going to give you lots of money. That's actually what's happening. Now, in other words, so what have we got now? Okay, what we've got now, quite apart from this fissure between the two Palestinian areas, we've got a situation in which the international community is talking about a Palestinian state. The Israeli Prime Minister is talking about a Palestinian state. Apparently there's some kind of consensus that we're going to have some Palestinian state. However, we also know that there is a very large number of colonies throughout the areas which are supposed to form the Palestinian state. So the question becomes, where is this Palestinian state to be? Because I'm sure you all know that about 50% or slightly more is under Israeli control. 50% of the West Bank is under Israeli control. And of course the Jordan Valley is under Israeli control. So and Jerusalem is under Israeli control. So you ask yourselves, where is this Palestinian state going to be? And I'm very interested that I'm reading reports and hearing reports of something I was aware of even when I was there, when I worked for the Palestinian Authority in 2005, which is the so-called Jordan option, which is where this little rump bits of territory get somehow attached to Jordan in some shape or form. All these are kind of early ideas. But if you look at the situation, you can see a hopeless case. It's a hopeless case. These are islands of Palestinians in the midst of Israel-only roads, colonies, security areas. Gaza is cut off from the West Bank. The whole thing is absurd. And you ask yourself, how on earth? What are they talking about? What is this settlement they're talking about? Now, I think that one of the problems we've always faced with this conflict has been that we always open the book at chapter 12 or chapter 13 or something. No, whatever is the chapter, the immediate happening, people start to look at the immediate happening, and then they say, you can see Hamas is this or Fatah is that or whatever. The idea of that you actually can't understand the book if you start the story on chapter 13 doesn't seem to, it's not a popular idea. Actually, the only way to understand this is to go right back to the beginning of this world. That is the only way that it can be understood. And I don't actually blame people who are confused by this. I really can't blame them. And some of them say, well, to hell with all of them. You know, it's all too difficult. We can't understand it. Of course not, because you're constantly made, as I said, to start the story somewhere in the middle. Now, all one has to do, of course, is to go right back to the beginning of this nightmare. And the moment one does that, one realizes that all that you see today is inevitable, all of it. You could have perhaps not predicted the exact timing or the exact details, but in general, it's completely predictable, and it completely follows from the initial act of establishing the Jewish state in the heart of the Arab world. That was the problem. And I know I'm not saying anything that is new to people here, but one can't repeat too often how important it is to always go back. The temptation is, even I fall under it, is to look at the immediacy of the thing, the immediate details. But always one must go back. And of course, how we got here was because a Jewish state was established in Palestine, in the heart of the Arab world. This Zionist project was really, if you think about it, completely impossible. It's an impossible project. It should never, ever have been allowed to be either established or to succeed, ever. Because you could see, and in fact the early Zionists, to be fair to them, really knew that. They knew, they wrote that they could see that there would be problems with this. They were perfectly right in anticipating that the indigenous population, that is the population at whose expense this state was going to be set up, was not going to like it.